Hi everybody, it's Willow here, and I'm here today to talk about an issue that immensely pisses me off, and it is being plagiarized. Okay? And I think, this is something with these digital age times that is friggin' rampant. And it's particularly rampant with more sort of mainstream established people, even I would say pseudo alternative people, but people who have a public platform, ripping off people who are more underground, who are more radical, who have a edgier message. Okay. And I have come across this. I've been plagiarized numerous times. I don't even actually want to think about how many times I've been plagiarized that I haven't caught it. I've caught people red-handed plagiarizing me 4 or 5 times now. And the most recent situation is something that's been going on for 6 years, okay, 6 long years now, where there is a person who is working for an organization opposed to genetically modified organisms. And she has ripped off my genetically modified alfalfa work for 6 long years now with no citation whatsoever. No credit given to the fact that this has happened. Okay, so the broader issue is the vulnerability, I think, of radical people, underground people, people who don't court a big public platform. Okay, I'm a punk writer, punk astrologer, anarchist, whatever you want to call it, anti-establishment. I'm a guerrilla journalist. I'm a tenacious friggin' journalist and writer and researcher. And I cover things, I go right to the root and I hammer away at it for years, okay? Years and years and years. And anyone who is a regular reader of either my blog or my Patreon articles or combination of the two knows that, okay? I've been doing this for 12 years. I've been writing my blog for 11 years now. And it's a hardcore blog and it's covered hardcore topics for 11 long years now, okay? And I have some readers that have been reading it since almost the beginning. So for a decade, they've been reading what I'm writing, okay? So I'm not actually a slouch. I'm not actually someone who's can just be kind of pushed into a corner, or someone who can be plagiarized with no consequence. But unfortunately, because I am more of an underground writer, I'm more of a guerrilla journalist, and purely independent person, I don't have a big organization behind my name, or something that the mainstream thinkers would think is really impressive, right? I don't have any of that. So people feel like it's okay to rip me off. And of course, this is not just a phenomenon that affects me. This is something that's rampant these days. Rampant. And it always has been, right? Co-opting a radical message, co-opting the underground, co-opting punk, co-opting anarchists, co-opting anything that's edgy or raw or real, right? Folding that into something that's less edgy and raw and real, less authentic, okay? So the situation with my genetically modified alfalfa work is this. I started working on genetically modified alfalfa to raise awareness about it and to stop it from being, number one, being sold and planted in anywhere in the world, but in particular in Canada, because we were at the point where, it wasn't being planted here and we still had some ability to keep it out of the country, okay? Which with cross-pollination, obviously it's all contaminated at this point, but there was a moment in time where we could really rally the troops. So 2011 is when genetically modified alfalfa started being commercially sold and grown in the US, okay? So that's when I jumped on it, okay? The thing that immediately perked my ears up was Whole Foods backing down on its anti-GMO stance and calling for a coexistence policy, which is what all the sellouts call for. Let's just put it that way. Thinking that we can grow GM crops but just keep them segregated. Okay, well, with GM alfalfa, that's not possible because it's a feral perennial plant. It's the first feral perennial GMO plant planted in North America. So probably planted anywhere because North America seems to be the testing ground for all this shit, you know? So yeah, so basically this was the situation that I was dealing with was the initial story was, you know, exposing Whole Foods Market, right, for softening its stance on GMOs and for calling for a coexistence policy, which is not possible. Not possible with a number of different GMOs, and definitely not alfalfa. Okay. So that was a stepping off point, and that was in 2011. And I wrote an article that ran in the Aquarian newspaper in Winnipeg, and I'm not sure if it's still in the archives, but it ran in the Aquarian newspaper. Okay, so I kind of kept picking away at it over the next little while. But then in February 2013 is when I really started putting the pedal to the metal, okay? And I did an absolute blitz of work, okay? I wrote a GM alfalfa primer, so basically just a kind of a basic article laying out the situation, and I sent that out widely. Okay, I sent it out to newsrooms across Canada. I sent it to organic grocery stores and health food stores across Canada. I sent it to organic groups across Canada. I was calling newsrooms across Canada to try to get them to cover this story. I was reaching out to farmers groups and organic groups and just, you know, saying like, whoa, we really need to get on top of this. One of the groups that I reached out to and one of the groups that I sent my primer to was the Canadian Biotechnology Action Network, CBAN, okay? And the coordinator there, named Lucy Sherritt, I sent her my primer, and I followed up on the phone. I called her on the phone. Okay, so what's important here is that this was in February 2013. This is when I did my immediate blitz. I did a letters to the editor campaign across Canada as well. The letter got into a few different papers across Canada. And I did letters to the editor for years after. So, you know, it runs the gamut. But anyway, February 2013, I contacted Lucy Sherritt. And she actually, at the time, didn't really know what alfalfa was. Okay? She thought that it was sprouts that you put in your sandwiches. And that was basically the extent of it. And she even told me in February 2013 that she had a hard time figuring out how to get the public to care about this issue. And, you know, it sounded like she didn't really care that much about it herself, to be quite frank. So I basically had to enlighten her and educate her that alfalfa is actually a primary livestock feed for all kinds of animals: cattle, horses, rabbits, turkeys, chickens, you know, whatever, you know, guinea pigs, like what there's, you know, it's a widespread livestock feed. And it's also a common fertilizer used in the organic system. So in organic soil, they're using alfalfa. Okay. They also use it as a transition crop transition from a conventional farm to an organic farm. They use alfalfa as that transition crop. So contamination by GMOs would be devastating. Okay, contamination by GM alfalfa would be devastating because organics are supposed to be completely separate from GMOs. So if there's unintentional contamination of the alfalfa crop, which is going on, which has been proven multiple times, that's hugely detrimental to the organic system or to any system that wants to be opposed to GMOs. Not only that, but GMOs have proven to be damaging to animals' health, right? Digestive system, reproductive system, causing tumors. What else? Just all all kinds. That's enough, right? Organ damage. You know, there's just been so much damage. It damages the whole system. So we're feeding that to our animals, you know, this contaminated alfalfa. So it's actually a huge issue. And she was not aware of this, okay? So I sent her my primer, and I was along the lines of like, oh, maybe we can work together on this. Like, you know, I've done a lot of legwork on this, and, you know, I'm happy to, join forces with somebody who's of like mind. No. That wasn't going to happen. So the first thing that she did was she tried to censor me, because I'd also had bumper stickers made up that said, "Stop GM alfalfa, say no to Frankenhay." I still have those for sale, by the way, if anyone would like one. And she sort of tisked me and told me that I really shouldn't use the word Frankenhay because, CBAN kind of frowns on that, and that, that's just not a term we like to use. And right there I thought, are you delusional, bitch? Like, you really think that you're going to be able to censor my message? I'm an independent activist doing my own research, educating myself and then the public, writing about this mostly for free. Okay. Doing all the legwork to contact newsrooms, to contact, to send my primer out widely, made bumper stickers. I did like standard poster board protesting at farmers markets and at music festivals, and I sold bumper stickers at art markets, like just a complete blitz, and she thinks, not to mention I'm a cattle rancher's daughter, okay? So like alfalfa, yeah, I know what alfalfa is because cattle eat alfalfa. Alfalfa's hay, okay? So this urban chick who didn't know what alfalfa was, thought that she was going to tell me the message that I could put out, right? The message that was cleansed enough and clean enough and non-controversial enough for her liking, right? Okay, so basically, I realized at that point that, yeah, this isn't gonna work out. I also found out that she's funded at least partially by the National Farmers Union, and that to me indicates why she's not, truly opposed to GM, why she's, watering down the message a little bit, because a lot of farmers grow GMOs, right? A lot of farmers are, very heavily invested in genetic modification of food. So the people that are paying her salary, she's a paid activist, P.S. activist, and I'm a person who's doing it mostly for free. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind when about this ripping off story as well. So I realized, like, okay, well, we are not on the same wavelength at all, like, not even close. So, and I generally don't like dealing with kind of like bureaucratic organizations like that, because I find the same thing, that there's a lot of control, there's a lot of micromanaging. There are people in positions of power that I don't think really deserve to be there, or I don't share their views, etc. Right? So anyway, I also contacted the National Farmers Union about my GM alfalfa work, and I mentioned, anyway, sorry, skipped a step here. So almost immediately after I sent my primer and I basically filled her in on what alfalfa really was and why this is actually a huge threat to agriculture in general, but definitely organic agriculture, she immediately started using my information from the primer. She immediately, on her website, and also in the reports that were being put out by CBAN, which is her, basically, she immediately started using my information. And I called her on it at the time, and she denied it at the time. I also contacted the National Farmers Union, not because of that, just because I wanted to connect with different groups. And I told the woman there what had happened, that, she tried, that Lucy Sherritt tried to, censor my message, and I sent her this primer. She thought that alfalfa was sprouts that you put in salad or in your sandwich, and, really didn't know what alfalfa was. And so, I sent her my primer, and she started using my information without attribution. And this was in early 2013 that I noticed this started happening. And, it gutted me. I mean, every time I get plagiarized, I feel absolutely sick to my stomach. I feel horrified, enraged, disgusted. I feel helpless in a lot of respects because, again, these people from these like public positions, more established public positions than I have, are able to get away with this, right? All they have to do is deny it. And then, most people, unfortunately, most mainstream thinking people are going to side with the popular, middle of the road thinking kind of person, not the radical, not the guerrilla journalist, not the person who's doing this like purely independently, right? And luckily I have enough readers on my site and supporters of what I do that, you know, that doesn't bother me so much. All I really care about is talking to the right people, communicating with the right people, you know, getting this information out to the right people, to people who appreciate it, to people who would never rip me off, would never dream of ripping me off without, you know, would never dream of using my work without giving me my due for it, right? Okay, so anyway, this is all kind of the backstory of what happened here. And yeah, it pissed me off, but there was nothing I could really do about it because, again, she denied it. She denied what was going on. Anyway, so I've kind of like gnashed my teeth at this organization for a while now. And one of the main problems that I see is that it's kind of this like, it's set up in kind of this like, establishment communication system where she's this PR person for GMO issues and everything's funneled through her, right? I actually wrote about this on my blog. And I'm actually just going to read this quickly because this sums up the problem with organizations like CBAN, and especially being run by a single individual who then kind of controls the message, controls the information. If anyone brings up an issue about genetic modification of the food supply in Canada, they'll be directed to this organization. That they're like the go-to. Okay. So this is from an April 12th, 2013 article on my blog called Pluto Retrograde and the Requirement to Go Deeper. Okay, and so this is an article I wrote after my run-in with her, after I had sent my primer to her, and she'd she tried to censor my bumper sticker, she tried to censor my message, and then she immediately started using information from my primer without any attribution whatsoever, without even saying just directly to me, oh, gee, thanks, this is absolutely great information. Could I use this, even if she had approached me like that, I more than likely would have been happy to let that go. Okay. The issue of genetic modification, April 12th, 2013. The issue of genetic modification of our food is being funneled in Canada through an establishment template communications framework called CBAN, or the Canadian Biotechnology Action Network. Under this framework, information is carefully controlled to include only the least incendiary and most widely palatable bits. Instead of a diverse group of well-educated people speaking out on this issue across the country, media are directed to a single communications person or a small handful of carefully vetted farmers whose livelihoods are directly affected. With Jupiter transiting Gemini, as it was at the time, we need many voices, many perspectives being heard publicly through media. Making the issue broader, hitting people at the fridge and at the fork is a necessity. But what we have is a single lobbyist and a handful of farmers sending the same messages over and over again through media. These messages do not make the leap. They don't make the necessary connections among alfalfa, hay, animals, fertilizer, soil, farmers, food, supermarkets, and citizens cooking and eating their daily meals. They do not facilitate the crossover we need as far as catalyzing the entire eating public on this issue. We need leadership and bold, immediate new direction in the fight against genetic contamination of our food supply. But much of this is coming from the same templates and structures we are attempting to change. Much of it plays by the rules of establishment structures and these establishment communications frameworks and these communications professionals that everything is streamed through, right? We need every voice raised on this issue in an immediate, undeniable, irrefutable global cacophony, and we need to keep these voices raised. We don't need public relations flacks controlling the flow of information or watering down the messages sent to the public. We don't need figureheads, farmer or otherwise, to legitimize this issue. We need raw, messy, real, potent, effective, and undeniable. And that's not what we get from a cleansed communications network following the template of establishment communications. We get communications figureheads controlling who can say what and when. We get official spokespeople who keep the issue far too narrow to be truly effective. We get people jockeying for position politically within the protest movement, with paid lobbyists motivated above all else to keep their jobs. And I will add, we get people who plagiarize from the more raw and real activists like me to prop up their own positions as the authority figures on GMO issues. Okay? So, okay, bring it up to the future, or the present, sorry. Bring it up to the present. And I recently saw I've tried to kind of avoid CBAN for obvious reasons, just because this is incredibly infuriating to be treated this way, and then to be treated that way, to be tried, to have this person try to control me, and then also to be laughed at by the National Farmers Union. The National Farmers Union women laughed at me that the great Lucy Sherritt would be, pilfering information from the likes of me. That was kind of the vibe. Just a really, really, really stupid situation. But anyway, I recently saw a report by CBAN, put out by CBAN, called GM Contamination in Canada. And so I flipped through it. There wasn't much in there that I wasn't aware of. But again, I'm interested in the GM alfalfa information. And of course, it's basically a rewritten version of my GM alfalfa primer. Okay. So I wrote the primer, like I said, I wrote the initial article in 2011 that was published in the Aquarian. I wrote a primer immediately after that. I didn't publish it on the blog right away. I was sending it out to people, sent it out to Lucy Sherritt in February 2013. And then as the years went by, I updated it, right? Because that's what researchers and journalists do. They update their information, they add new tidbits, et cetera, et cetera. So over the course of a few years, I had sort of painstakingly been following this GM alfalfa story, and anything that came out into the media, I added into the primer. I added new information into the primer. They started growing test plots in Ontario and Quebec. I added that into the primer. And then I made a zine about it. So basically, I put the information from the primer into a zine, and it's called Stop Genetically Modified Alfalfa. Sorry. By Willow of Willow's Web Astrology. Yeah. But that part's important. And then look at the back. It's like, cattle, don't poison us. So that was in early 2017 that I put out the zine. But again, it's information that I've been compiling since 2011. As I'm reading her GM alfalfa section, again, I'm just getting hot under the collar because it's so obviously been pilfered from my primer, from my articles, from my zine, from my work, right? So, I got pissed off about it, and I thought, again, I just felt kind of helpless and like, well, what am I going to do about it? She's just going to deny it. She denied it in 2013 that she was using my information. So of course she's not going to, but I thought, I'm not going to let her off the hook. Like, I'm actually going to contact her and tell her that, like, this is what's gone on, and I would appreciate attribution. I would appreciate being attributed, because that's basically she's rewritten my primer and put it out as if it were her work through CBAN, okay? And you can't do that. You can't do that. It doesn't matter how much you change it around the edges. And she was a smart plagiarizer, okay? My previous plagiarizers were dumb enough that they would copy and paste stuff out of my articles and then leave a link to my site or to a previous article in the copy and paste. That's happened twice. I'm just gonna say, and by people who have like big platforms. Okay, the first time it happened was by a guy named Tiburon the Earthkeeper, who's a total New Ager. Okay, he's on the cover of like New Age magazines, huge following, and he probably, I would say more like his minions, copied and pasted almost an entire article of mine. I think it was on Eclipse season or some hot button thing that people are all like up in arms about. And she basically changed it to be slightly new agey around the edges, but it was like clearly a copy and paste, and then sent it out to the newsletter, sent it out to Tiburon, the Earthkeeper's newsletter group, as if Tiburon had written it, or, the Tiburon people had written it. But she had actually copied and pasted a link to, and thank God this was before I knew how to do hyperlinks. And so I just literally like posted a link, the letters of a link to a previous article of mine, and she kept that in the the newsletter. And so then I saw people on my stat counter coming from like, I was like, what is this? I click on it and I'm like, whoa, you know. So I called her out about it. There was a big rigmarole about how, oh, this is universal information and we, you know, no, it doesn't belong to anyone, you know, all this new agey bullshit. So anyway, that happened. And then more recently, I was plagiarized by a guy named Dave Hodges from the Common Sense Show. Hot tip, this guy doesn't have any common sense. And he also is one of these kind of like big platform truth teller. He's kind of like middle of the road platform, I guess. Truth teller types, kind of like patterning himself after Alex Jones type of thing. And he too copy and pasted really obscure research that I had done on Fukushima. There's just absolutely no way that he came up with the same research that I did, the exact same sources. And the real kicker, again, is that he accidentally copy and pasted a hyperlink to my site in the stuff that he had lifted. Okay. And this guy was psychotically scary and threatened to sue me. Because I had been plagiarized by him, obviously. He claimed he'd never seen my site. He came up with this research all independently on his own. Again, not possible. There is no way that he came up with all of these obscure facts and all this obscure research, and even the same wording. He even used the same wording that I used. He referred to like crickets chirping, and that's something that I referred to as far as mainstream media covering Fukushima. You know, so just blatant plagiarism. And I had to go above his head to the Before It's News site before he would finally put a link to the original article in the stuff that he had filtered. Anyway, so this is something that has happened to me, and this has happened to me a few other times. I won't like regale with those are the two most blatant and glaring examples. I won't go into detail because like it's not really that. You know, who cares? People are plagiarizing rampantly. That's the takeaway from this. Anyway, so I read through the CBAN report on GM alfalfa, and I'm not going to go through all of the obvious points that she's ripped off from me, but I mean, it's basically a fleshed out version of my primer. The whole thing is, you know, and she's been smart enough not to leave any links in. She's been smart enough to find different sources. For some of them, for some of the stuff, it's the exact same source that I used as well. But again, same situation with the Dave Hodges guy, is that it's not possible that she put together all of this like semi-obscure research in the same order, often using the same wording, same sources, you know, and just same general, you know, terminology and ideas all, you know, it's just not possible. It's not possible. So anyway, I emailed her and I told her, you know, I would appreciate some attribution because, you know, you've lifted this from my site or you've seen it somewhere else. I don't know. And not possible. And so, of course, I got a blanket denial from her, which I was ready for because she also denied doing it in 2013. And this is what she replied. And I will just say that this is almost word for word what Dave Hodges said to me as well. Okay. This is from Lucy Sherritt from CBAN. You will see that all of the information on GM alfalfa in the GM contamination report is cited, and the report has 4 pages of references. Okay, well, that means nothing because... you know, you can, after the fact, go in and find the sources. I mean, I use sources for mine as well. So I don't know how that's... I can personally assure you that we did not lift information from your articles. Not possible, Lucy Sherritt. Not possible. So your personal assurance is not assuring to me. You will appreciate that because we are/were both looking into the same issue at the same time, and because we are both engaged in rigorous research, we are bound to identify some of the same information and sources. Same exact argument Dave Hodges used, that he just independently came up with all this same stuff. However, please know that our report is founded on our independent research, which is also the foundation of the 3 reports CBAN produced on GM alfalfa in 2013. Okay, so she's trying to basically say that, you know, we started it before you did, okay? But I contacted her in February 2013, and it was April 2013 when the first CBAN report, as far as I know, the first CBAN report on GM alfalfa started. They also started this, like, it really didn't go anywhere, but like picket your MP office kind of, and, you know, petition, stuff like that. The kind of establishment end of things, right? In April 2013. But I had already talked to her 2 months prior, and this whole situation had gone on, and I had already given her my primer, and she'd already started using information from my primer on her site and in. Okay, so like I said, I'm not going to go word for word over this, but this is just one of the examples that that is just not possible, really, that she came up with. The whole same tone, you know. I was the one who told her, this is the first line of my my GM alfalfa article. Monsanto's Roundup Ready alfalfa is now the first genetically modified feral perennial plant to ever be planted on North American soil. Okay, so her kickoff is, alfalfa is the first perennial GM crop approved for growing in Canada. Okay, so yeah, sure, you know, that's not like that big of a deal, for sure. But like I say, there's too many instances of that to be coincidental. And then we go into the research. Okay, we go into the research that I did. And this is, again, research that I have not seen compiled together anywhere else, ever. This is stuff that I, again, picked up painstakingly over the years and added into my primer and compiled into my primer. Okay, so this is what I'm going to start with. Sorry. Okay. A study done on GM alfalfa by the United States Department of Agriculture in 2005 found substantial contamination of the natural alfalfa crop by transgenic varieties before GM alfalfa was even approved for commercial sale. The study surveyed 4,580 fields in California, Idaho, and Washington state where conventional alfalfa seed was being grown. About 10% of fields had feral or rogue varieties, and in 27% of those cases, the rogue varieties were transgenic. Okay, the source for that is an article called GM Alfalfa May Already Be in Alberta, and the authors are Alexis Kindlin and Glenn Cheater. Okay, so she also talks about that very specific situation. Talking about the contamination and sorry, what is it? Basically, okay, the Canadian, since then, GM contamination has been found in the U.S. and U.S. government scientists have reported the wide dispersal of feral GM alfalfa. The Canadian Food Inspection Agency and Health Canada approved GM glyphosate-tolerant Roundup Ready alfalfa in 2005, but it was not until April 2013 that anyway, blah, 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 blah. She used the exact same article that I used, okay, right there. Then we move on. Okay, then we move on in my article here. The first case of alfalfa contamination by a genetically modified variety was reported by a farmer in Washington state in September 2013. The farmer's natural alfalfa crop was rejected for export because, without his knowledge or intention, it was found to contain genetically modified material from Monsanto's Roundup Ready GM alfalfa variety. The Washington farmer complained to the United States Department of Agriculture, which responded with an "it's not our problem" stance on the issue. The USDA claimed that the unintentional contamination of the natural alfalfa crop, as well as the resulting loss of markets and non-GM food security, were a commercial issue that must be dealt with in the marketplace. Okay. Sorry. This is her version. In 2013, a farmer in Washington state reported that his alfalfa shipments were rejected when the export buyer tested and found GM alfalfa. The U.S. Department of Agriculture concluded that the contamination incident was a commercial issue, i.e. that it did not require government action because the GM crop was approved for commercial growing. Okay, so same exact source there. Okay, then we move on. This is from my article. Because many countries worldwide have banned genetically modified seeds, crops, and foods, including the European Union, any crop found to contain GM alfalfa will be rejected for export. In October 2014, for example, China slammed the door to U.S. alfalfa hay imports after unintentional GM alfalfa contamination was found. Okay, back to her 2019 report. GM contamination has also been found in U.S. alfalfa exports. In 2014, China began testing its imports of U.S. alfalfa after it found GM traits in hay shipments from 3 companies. Those companies were blacklisted from exporting to China. Several other hay shipments from the U.S. were rejected when GM traits were found. U.S. alfalfa exports to China declined sharply. Blah, 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 blah. Okay. Again, she's fleshed it out with a few more facts, but it's directly out of my primer. No, is that everything? Nope. Nope, that's not everything. Okay, so this is from my article again. In 2012, before GM alfalfa was even being planted on Canadian soil, an Alberta farmer discovered that his alfalfa seed had been contaminated by a GM variety. The farmer applied Roundup to a failed alfalfa crop in order to kill it, discovering that about 100 plants survived the application of the potent chemical herbicide. Those plants had been genetically modified to withstand Roundup. So although the farmer did not knowingly or willingly order, purchase, or sow GM alfalfa seed, he got it anyway. One would have to be naive to believe this contamination was an isolated incident. Okay, and this is back to her 2019 report. In 2013, a farmer in Washington... Oh, no, sorry. No, that's not... Right. No GM alfalfa contamination incidents have been confirmed in Canada, but in 2016, an Alberta farmer anonymously reported to the media that the foundation seed he had ordered from a U.S. supplier 4 years earlier was contaminated with GM Roundup Ready alfalfa seed. Okay, so she uses basically 4 points of research, and they're the exact 4 same points of research, basically in the same kind of chunk of the article that I did. So, and again, she's using the exact same sources and, fairly obscure points on this. So I'm not saying that she didn't follow up on this and, dig into it on her own. What I'm saying is that this all stemmed from my primer, my article on GM alfalfa, my work, my zine, okay? And that she is basically regurgitating what's in that zine and in that article. Work that, again, I've been doing almost exclusively for free for, 8 years now, 8 long years now. She's folded that into their CBAN reports, okay, with absolutely no attribution. And part of this, of course, is, oh, well, how would a respectable organization like CBAN, who basically has to cater to like middle of the road thinking and, farmers who use GMOs, you can't alienate those people. How is this person going to attribute an independent journalist like me who doesn't have, a CBC behind her or Fox News or CBAN or, any of these other big bloated organizations, these big bureaucratic organizations. The thing is that when you're a writer and you're writing from the heart and your voice, your research, the work that you've done, when someone pilfers that, it, okay? It's like a punch to the gut. You just know that this person has used you and used your work, used your ideas, used your research without a thought, without a care about the fact that they are actually stealing. They're actually stealing my energy, my time, my thoughts, and my work. So it is actually a big deal. It is actually a big deal to be when you're ripped off, especially by someone, again, with kind of a bigger, more mainstream public platform, because then it's very, very difficult, to battle these people when to me, it's obvious. And anyone that's seeing these things side by side, especially a reader of mine, definitely readers of mine would be able to instantly kind of pick this out, because I've been writing about this on my blog, again, for 8 years now. But I think even your layman would be able to look at this and say, yep, she's definitely lifted stuff there. So, the thing is, again, I'm not, I'm not like being the information police here or anything, but when you don't even acknowledge that you're building on the work of someone else, I did the groundwork on this issue. Okay. I did like tireless, like intense work on this issue. And I still do a fair amount of work on this issue to this day. I was the one who educated her on what alfalfa even was, right? And so then, she's saying, oh, well, we were on top of this already by like spring 2013. And it's like, well, yeah, but you were catalyzed after reading my primer and you started using my information without, attribution immediately. Like I noticed her doing that immediately. Because that was back when I still read CBAN. For info. So anyway, I know this is kind of an obscure issue and it's not of interest to very many people, but it's something that is hugely detrimental for people of a more underground nature and for people whose work is more underground, because it is very, very, very easy to rip us off. It's very easy for people to just co-opt what we're doing and kind of water it down and, add a few words, add a few extra research links, and then pass it off as their own, And that's what's going on en masse. Again, not just with Lucy Starrett from CBAN, but from, all over the place. Because if I'm being plagiarized, and I've actually caught people, five or six times with like obvious plagiarism, just imagine how many times it's gone on that I haven't caught it, right? I mean, it's only been really luck that I've come across these 5 or 6 people who have blatantly ripped me off, And the thing is, like, I actually do consider myself established. I consider myself, well established as an underground astrologer and underground writer and underground journalist and underground activist. So for me, I think it's actually silly to put so much, I think these figureheads are silly. And I think that, having these communications people, sort of held up as like the go-tos is ridiculous, because, they know where their bread is buttered. Let's be frank. They know who's paying their paycheck, and they know the type of message that will be acceptable and the type of message that won't be, and I don't have to care about that because I'm independent, and what people like from me is the fact that I tell it like it is, and I don't kowtow to anyone, right? And I don't kowtow to you, CBAN, okay? So I'm just going to say that if you have your wagon hitched to that organization, I would say unhitch and start using your own voice, start doing your own things. Because the problem is that these figureheads are put up. I mean, it's like controlled opposition, right? These figureheads are put up, and then independent citizens are like, oh, it's okay. Like, I'll leave it to the officials. I'll leave it to the experts. That person's already got it under control. No. You know what I mean? That's the opposite of what we need. We need people really like digging in independently and doing things independently and like being undiluted, an undiluted voice. And a raw voice. And yeah, it's not a voice that's intentionally going to be pissing people off. I don't try to intentionally piss people off. I don't try to be controversial. I mean, the fact that I even am considered a radical or that I'm considered controversial blows my mind, because most of what I'm talking about to me is just straight up common sense. Is straight up like a human being with a heart and a soul and a sense of right and wrong, living in the world. That's the only thing that I'm really doing. But a lot of this snakiness is going on, and a lot of the snakiness is, people are getting away with it. So, I think we do have to speak up. We do have to push back against this stuff. And Yeah, I mean, this is my testimonial. You can take it for what it is. I'm an honest to the core person. I would never make up a story like this. This is the situation of me being an independent activist butting up against establishment groups. This is the situation. So anyway, take it for what it is. Please respect writers. Please respect journalists. Please respect creative people of all stripes. Understand that their work is not something that you can just use willy-nilly. Plagiarism is theft. Okay, ripping people off, even just ripping people's style off, ripping their ideas off, co-opting their ideas, co-opting their style, that is really theft. Okay, it's fraud. It's fraudulent. And that's not cool. Okay, so until next time, plagiarists can fucking suck it across the board. There you go.